really, I don't really have much of a fear aspect, So if it's daunting, I just try to break it into little sections. Like, okay, we know we're going to be out there for 6 days, and we're going to be moving for 18 to 22 hours in a day. It's daunting having experienced it, right? But I just try to break it into sections. Okay, we got a 24-hour section that we're going to be on our feet in the mountains, or if say we're going to be on the ocean paddle for 16 hours, or biking for another dozen hours. I just break it into sections, and just one section at a time to get through it, which really I think helps.
Mike Kloser was a true pioneer of mountain biking, taking the sport to the next level after its invention in the early 1980s. Mike went on to win multiple races in Europe and the US before finding his heart in adventure racing. His list of achievements on the podium is outstanding. Help me welcome a legend and an inspiration to all of us who venture outdoors, pushing the limits of our bodies and sports, Mike Kloser. Hey, Mike.
Hi, Greg. Good to finally
talk to you. Thanks for taking your time out of your day today to chat.
My pleasure.
Well, let's dive right in and get to know you a little bit better. Do you have any nicknames?
Actually, excuse me. There's a good one that you'll like. So when I raced in Europe, I'll say the name and then I'll give you the history behind it. When I raced mountain bikes in Europe, the early days, what was it, late 80s actually. I had a nickname, and I guess it came from American crew I traveled with a little bit, Dave Weens and the likes. And they were always good about giving somebody a nickname or a title or something. But it was Alpine Eddie is the nickname. And so where that comes from is, first of all, I was racing Alpine Stars bikes. So that was kind of okay. And I lived in the mountains. And so people actually thought it was something to do with the mountains, living in the Alpine areas and what have it. But the second name of it came from, and this is where it gets a little bit, okay, maybe over the top, but I'll say that, and the rest of that in a second. When I was racing over in Europe, my early racing years, I was on a pretty heavy bonus schedule, in the sense of, like, most of my income through my contracts was through bonuses in racing performance. And so when I raced, I just raced to win. I didn't just race because I was participating in a race. So the French guys and the Swiss and Italians and so forth that I was racing a lot against, as well as the Brits. One of the French guys says to me one race, he goes, "Why do you always race like that? Why can't you let somebody else win?" And I said, well, because, this is the way I have to make my living. And, it was a nice conversation anyway, but it was kind of funny. And so they nicknamed me the Cannibal. And so that nickname changed over into Alpine Eddie, after Eddie Merckx, who was dubbed the Cannibal on the road. So that's where that comes from.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like mountain biking put you in the public spotlight in the 80s and 90s, but what sports did you grow up with as a kid?
Oh boy. As a kid, we just played a lot of sandlot sports. We played basketball in the driveway or at the park, baseball, same type of thing. We had a lot of property we had several acres. It was an old farm. And so between where I grew up in our own family's yard and neighbors' yards in the farmer rural area of Dubuque, Iowa, we just played a lot of sports outdoors, whether it was football, hockey on the ponds, basketball in the driveway or at the park, baseball, even a little bit of soccer. Not much soccer, but that was all I pretty much did as a kid. And then I ride a Stingray bicycle, or old Schwinn. What was it? Schwinn Varsity 10-speed, that type of thing.
Oh yeah.
Before mountain bikes, of course. And so that was kind of what I did. I actually, my wife always laughs about this story, but when I played Little League. I was a pretty good ball player, but not to the level that, could have made it anywhere in pro ranks. At least I wouldn't think so, but who knows? So in high school, I was freshman. It was just one team for the high school. And so I tried out for, I guess it was shortstop because that's why I played a lot in Little League. And that was not the best choice because one, I was going up against the varsity players as well as the coach's son, who also was a good player. And so I just got cut, first year out trying out for it. So I got cut and I never went back and tried again, which is unlike me nowadays. Like if somebody says you can't do it, I'm going to try to prove them wrong. So anyway, that was kind of where that led. And then I moved to Colorado and in Vail, I skied a bit in the winter in Iowa because there was a ski area about 5 minutes from the house. It's called Sundown. And it actually was a decent little hill considering, it was in the Midwest. And I think it had 450 vertical feet, several lifts, and, some reasonably challenging terrain on it. But anyway, so I moved out to Colorado for skiing because I was, one, I loved the mountains. As a kid, we traveled through and I was like, I'm going to move there one day. And then two, skiing brought me out here. And so when I moved to Vail, I just saw this crazy amount of, well, I don't know if I call it crazy, but anyway, the athleticism of the community. Everybody was always doing something outdoors, whether it was kayaking, horseback riding, running, or biking, or tennis or golf, you name it. Everybody was outdoors doing something, and in the summer months, and obviously skiing in the winter, and there's the crossover, snowshoeing, and so forth. And so it just kind of was, what do I say, addictive, or you look at it and you're like, well, I guess I probably should do some of that too, right? So I started running first, and then played softball in the local softball league and so forth, and then rode motorcycles, dirt bikes that is, and then just kind of one thing led to the next, and I found that I had a little bit of a ability or gift in running. Nothing exceptional, but okay, like I could do really well in hill climbs or the half marathons or 10Ks and such like that, but usually trail running, that is. Some road, but anyway, that's kind of how just one thing led to the next.
Yeah. So what got you from there? Like what got you into competitive mountain biking?
So I was, like I say, riding or motorcycles when I came out here. And so I had some bike handling skills from that. And then I picked up this magazine one time. I think it was like Outside Magazine or something. And I see this guy riding across some high alpine meadow and all the wildflowers on a mountain bike. And I'm just like, oh, that sounds kind of crazy. When I got my motorcycle, I can just twist the throttle and go, right? And then I had some friends who got into it locally, and we had a local bike series. It was first it was a road bike series, time trial, and some criteriums and things like that. And then they started a series, which was the Mountain Challenge. It was run by a sports shop called Snug Sports, which was in 3 different mountain communities. So one was Park City, Utah, Sun Valley, Idaho, and then Vail, Colorado. And so those shops all put on simultaneous mountain bike series in their villages or their towns. And so I thought, well, what the heck, I'll give it a try. And I had a mountain bike I bought the year before. So this was 85, I guess. And first race, I go out, and I was talking about this with an old buddy who I used to race against a lot here in Vail. I was just in town, Pat McIlvain. And anyway, I remember the race was on the top of Vail Pass. And so you started on a dirt road and you raced down this old kind of rough 4-wheel drive road, I guess you might say. So pretty, basic stuff at the time. Mountain biking hadn't really evolved that much. And all we really had was either Jeep roads or service roads and motorcycle trails. So anyway, as it turns out, the gun went off, and the timing vehicle was one at the start. They had like a 2 or 3 mile uphill and about a 8 or 9 mile downhill. And I ended up beating the timing truck to the bottom. And so they didn't have an official time. Sort of official anyway. So that was kind of the start. I had, obviously beginner's luck or some success with that first race, but I did well on the road time trials and stuff I mentioned prior, and the circuit races and criteriums. So, I just thought, well, heck, I'll just keep dabbling in it. And I won that series that year in Vail, the Snug Mountain Series, Mountain Challenge, I guess they called it. And then they had to culminate the season, they had all three towns bring their top racers to Vail. And so they had a championship. And that championship consisted of, I think, 3 or 4 races over 3 days. And I ended up winning that event. I don't know if I won all the events in that race, but I won the overall regardless. And in that, I won a Fisher mountain bike. And so I thought, wow, hey, that's awesome. And so the next year, I guess so that was 85. So I think won his bike, and Tom Ritchie, and maybe Specialized, because there was really just a few brands at the time. Joe Breeze had bikes, I guess, too. But anyway, it was kind of a toss. Back and forth talking to Tom and Gary about opportunities, and it ended up that Gary offered me a little better package, and so I went with Gary, and that was that. The next year I started racing Colorado series, so 86, which was, kind of like our, we have state series events, a lot of that you still see now. And then we had the national series, which was Norber sanctioned. And so they had I guess the national championships for several years was held in Durango. And that first year I went down to Durango. And when I say first year is a so-called pro. I raced down there, and I think I must have finished the top 5. I don't recall for sure, but I was racing against Overend, and I don't think Tomac had quite hit the scene yet, but Ned Overend and a lot of the other older names were all in there. And so it was great, great way to get started, and just one thing led to the next.
Yeah, like as far as that progression, you accomplished so much in those early days of mountain biking, but what was that turn that made you get into adventure racing? Because it's a discipline within a whole nother beast of a sport.
Yeah, right. That really came about, I guess. So that was 85. I really kind of started racing mountain bikes, and then 97. So about 12 years later, I just looked at the scene, and it was like, okay, I'm not being able to be competitive with these younger upstarts, all the international racers and so forth, to the level that I was happy with, because I did not want to just race and be pack fill. I wanted to be a contender. And as it turned out, I wasn't alone in this decision. As I was listening to a podcast with Ned Overend and John Tomac about 6 months ago, a friend of mine sent it to me. And in that, it was interesting because I know John and Ned really well, and we're still good friends. Talk, occasionally once or twice a year. And I didn't know that they also decided that they were going to call it good around that same time frame. It might have been 97, 98, because they were no longer feeling they were competitive on the international scene. And as we come to find out, there was other underlying reasons to what was going on there. It wasn't just our physical ability on the bicycle. And so anyway, I raced through 97, and the middle of the year, I think I retired. It was a World Cup in Vail. It wasn't the World Championships, because I think we had the World Champs here in 96. And so anyway, I had what I considered my retirement from the racing scene on a national level and international level. And I just continued to do local stuff. Maybe I think I did a handful of Colorado events, and then the Vail series, just to kind of keep my competitive itch scratched. And right about that same time, a good friend of mine, Billy Madison, who lives here in Vail, had raced the Eco Challenge the year before up in British Columbia. And he said, hey, I want to get a team together for Australia. So that would have been in the fall. Is that right? Fall, I think it was 98. So it must have been the year. the year after. Anyway, he asked if I want to be a part of the team, and we had to go qualify in a race out in Malibu, California, which was called an Eco Challenge qualifier.
Hmm.
And Mark Burnett and his team had put it on, and they selected X number. I think it was 3 teams got selected from that. They got guaranteed entries, and I think we still had to pay. Or maybe it might have been comp, but we had a lot of other expenses anyway. So we went and raced, and it was what I consider a pretty poor performance. And I think we were the top American team, but I had much higher ambitions or expectations. And I told, backing up a second, I told Billy Madison that I would race with him and another Vail local who had raced also in British Columbia, I believe, with Billy, if I could have Sarah Ballantyne, who was my Fisher Mountain Bike Days racing companion. And she's just a gnarly outdoor chick, great girl. And so he agreed, and we, again, per my standards or expectations, we performed pretty poorly. I think we're 17th or 18th. But my wife says afterwards, I'm talking to her on the phone, and she says, "So what do you think? Are you going to do any more of these?" And I said, "I think I'm one and done." But the race settled down. I mean, the memories settled that back a little bit, and we started talking about maybe putting a team together for the next year in Morocco. And so we worked our asses off and watched videos and studied all the idiosyncrasies and the time splits of transitions and all that sort of stuff, and went and did a lot of training, figured it out. And the next year we went just with one different team member as Team Vail, and we won in Morocco. So that's the beginning of the end, right?
Nice. Then you were hooked.
I was hooked. Yeah.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say the beginning of the end, but the beginning of my next a dozen years worth of athletic craziness.
Yeah, for those who don't know what adventure racing is, what is this sport?
So adventure racing is really something I think the Kiwis came up with their race they had down there. It started with multi-sport events, like they have their coast to coast, which is, and the French might argue that they started it first, but anyway, they had their coast to coast race, which was kayaking, running, and cycling. I think it was road cycling, and they did other combinations of multi-sport events. And somebody decided, well, let's do adventure race, which is basically anywhere from like a day to 12 days anymore. There's these shorter, or even sprint races back when we had the Balance Bar series, which might have been like 3 to 5 hours. But it entails the competitors doing several different events, if not more than that, over the course of the race. The clock starts and doesn't stop until you cross the finish line. So it wasn't typically a stage race, which there are some stage race adventure races out there where you have clock stop at the end of each day's course, and then they'd start the next day, per se. But anyway, expedition racing is pretty much nonstop, co-ed sport, usually 3 to 5 individuals, depending on the race organizers and the length of the race and so forth. Eco Challenge has always been 4, well, at least starting in the year I participated, I know it was 4, because the Ray Gawa, which is a French version of the Eco Challenge, they had 5 competitors. And I think Mark Burnett, having raced in the Ray Gawa the first year he put on Eco Challenge, I think, which was in Utah, I think he did a 5-person team. But it has to be co-ed, can be a mixture of 2 to 3 men or women, depending upon the configuration, as per the team's own interest. And then it also, the sports it entails typically are mountain biking, running, navigation, map and compass, sometimes with GPSs, coast steering, orienteering, mountaineering. Coast steering is basically navigating or traveling along the coastline. So you might have to swim in the waters or oceans or what have it. Maybe even do some rope skills through there. They often have rope skills almost always in the races where you're ascending or rappelling and traversing and so forth. And you might have glacier travel, horseback riding, camel riding in Morocco. Yeah, about anything non-motorized is pretty much a go. Rafting, we've inner tubed, we've done it all pretty much.
That's amazing. Like there's so many activities involved with adventure racing. What would you say is your favorite? And then what would you say is your least favorite?
I've always liked the ropes because it's kind of uh, it might be a toss up on this one between ropes and rafting, but it's kind of a break from the intense activity or aerobic. And yeah, it isn't always that aerobic, but adventure racing because you're going for such a long period of time at times, but it's kind of a break from the intensity of it all. And you're climbing on a rappel or maybe 1,000-foot rappel, which is something. I guess there was. I might have been like a 300-meter rappel one time. I'm trying to remember
Whoa,
if we actually. I think we rappelled that far off of a cliff one time, which is big. Or a
that's
big
huge.
zip line across a gorge. Like we do in Mexico or wherever some of these races might be put on. Um, so the ropes were always a great kind of fun discipline for me. And then also I like the rafting. Like in Fiji, we had this really cool raft section, which for me it was really cool because I was pretty much the guide or the lead calling the shots guide on the back of the boat, and I had the Kiwi teammate Gordon beside me, so we were 2 and 2, and he would steer the one side and I'd steer the other, and I'd call out the shots, and it was pretty much nonstop. I bet it was like a 3-hour raft section with very little flat water, and
Wow.
most of the water was um, probably low level 4 down to level 2 class. So kept you on your toes.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so much of a team aspect, and I think that's one of the most appealing parts of the sport. Well, like, how do you go about choosing a team?
That's a good question. I get that question a lot myself. That really comes down to, I think, for many people, it's like, okay, who are their racing peers and friends and so forth? Maybe sometimes family, and they say, hey, why don't we go do this adventure race? And majority of the time, I think it works out pretty well. But there's a number of occasions that you see a lot of turmoil and dysfunctional teams, and we've had our share of moments out on the course with our different team members. When I say that, just high level class A type personalities that are intensely competitive. So you're going to get that, right? And then you throw in sleep deprivation, physical fatigue, all these type of things. They all kind of add up, and you end up with situations that aren't so desirable at times. But uh, it's really important, I think, when you're structuring a team, to have people with like-minded goals, first of all, and then secondly, probably similar levels of fitness. And then next would come, okay, skill level for the various disciplines. You're always going to have somebody that's stronger than another at pretty much every discipline you do out there, activity. So you can kind of pull off that their strengths, or you know look at what their advice might be and so forth, how to best manage that sort of stuff. So, and good teams will do that, but if it's a dictatorship, which we pretty much had a democracy on our team pretty much throughout the years. And there's other teams that it's like, okay, there's a team captain and you do as he says or she says, and that's that. That's the way it
Mhm.
works. We always operate a little differently, and I think that helped keep our team more unified throughout the races.
So yeah, I can see how these personalities are heightened with that race atmosphere. What are some of those experiences that might break a team in a race, and maybe how can you prepare for that?
Uh, Good question. I think you're going to look at maybe somebody's fear, for starters. Let's say you got somebody who's just afraid of heights, which is not a good thing for adventure racing. But we've had team members on our team as well that have, fear of heights, but they overcome it, and they just kind of, they might get really internally wound up or bound up, but they push through it. Um, but I think back to, the more of the issue is probably just the general disagreement, maybe on route choice. For say, if you got a few people that have map skills and they aren't just relying on one navigator, you can have, and we actually had one in Telluride where we had to basically say, okay, it's a majority rules on this route choice, because one person was very adamant that this is the way to go, and the other rest of us were, no, we should be going the other way, and so we just opted for the other way. But I think the other is, again, the fatigue, sleep deprivation and fatigue. It can just, some people handle it better than others, and as you know, when we get tired and exhausted, your patients tend to run a little lower, and you might become more emotional. And girls, when I say that, I don't mean to be sexist or anything. I think there are different hormones between men and women, and women can be a little more emotional. And I was talking to somebody about it the other day that I've had a few times where I've been out on the race course, and I just kind of put my foot down and said, okay, you know what, tears can wait till later. It's time to move on, and something of that nature. And in the end, it may not be so welcome at that time, but in the end, I've pretty much any of those situations like that, people have come back and said, hey, that's the type of inspiration I needed at the time, or the type of motivation or whatever. But yeah, I think it's probably more just difference of opinion that is really going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then also, I guess you can have people who are just not really suited for that type of team activity or sport, and then it just really rises to the top, like cream during the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a special person to complete these challenges. Like, most people would shy away from the thought of rappelling off a mountain or like running in the dark without knowing quite if you're going in the right direction. So what makes you take on these challenges, and how do you overcome that fear aspect?
I don't know if I don't really have much of a fear aspect when it comes to the heights and things like that, or even for say daunting perspective of what's ahead. So if it's daunting, I just try to break it into little sections. Like, okay, we know we're going to be out there for 6 days, and we're going to be moving for 18 to 22 hours in a day. It's daunting having experienced it, right? But I just try to break it into sections. Okay, we got a 24-hour section that we're going to be on our feet in the mountains, or for say we're going to be on the ocean paddle for 16 hours, or biking for another dozen hours. I just break it into sections, and just one section at a time to get through it, which really I think helps. And now, like with the Eco Challenge this last year in Fiji, you don't really know what's ahead and when until you're navigating progressing through the course. And then you get to a transition area or checkpoint, and they say, okay, this leg's over with. And once you got the maps that's going to happen, but you don't get all the maps at once typically anymore. And so, yeah, you're kind of uncertain what lies ahead until you get to that end of that segment. So that helps to break it up and get through it. And then I think if I circle back to, for say, fear of other things like heights, if I'm looking at a gorge and we're on a zip line, I've had these moments where I'm thinking, holy shit, I hope that these organizers have anchored these cables in well. And on the flip side of it, I just have to look at, like, I'm on a cast here. Thanks. I have to just look at it like, okay, there's not much I'm going to do if something does happen. It's just out of my control at that point. So you have to have faith. And we're actually climbing in Mexico where the rope was secured fine. And we had four people, 3 or 4 teams. I think we had 2 team members from each team on 4 ropes. So there's 2 teams that could rappel at the same time. And one of the Mexican team racers unclipped to go take a whiz before he rappelled, because they were setting somebody else up on the rope. And when he clipped back in, he just clipped back into his little beaner loop, not into his harness loop.
Oh,
Again, your primary harness loop. And as he started to repel, it snapped, and he was holding onto the rope with his hands. And I'm like 2 over, and my buddies on my team, Dan Weiland, was closer to him, and he was yelling. I said, just pull on. I didn't know it had broken. I said, just, because his descender device was still through the rope. And I saw that up there, and I said, just pull on the rope below the descender. And he's speaking Spanish to me, and he kind of grasped it. And we find out he was just holding on. It was like a 200-foot cliff. It doesn't matter. 50 feet can be the same outcome. And it was rocks below. And anyway, Dan came over to him, and he held on. I can't remember if he clipped on or held on. I think Dan helped hold on to him. And then the guy, one of the ropes guys from above, threw a rope over quickly because he was only maybe 40 feet from the rim at this point. And he grabbed him and clipped him in and repelled with him. But, those kind of things happen out there, just mistakes like that. But
wow.
the other thing that, we were down in the British Virgin Islands racing, and there was a section where we had to swim out to an island. It was only like a mile and a half swim or something like that. And then we would get to the island, and we'd take a spit across, landmass across, so we didn't have to swim back across again. But there was a checkpoint out there, and we're swimming, and I'm thinking, there's sharks in the water, and we all knew that. I don't think there were great whites down there, but it was kind of like, okay. Again, your goggles are kind of fogging. It's warm water, air temperature changes, and so your swim goggles are fogging, and you're swimming with backpacks on and running shoes, and so you're not moving real fast, obviously. It was just like, okay, well, my number's up. You just keep moving.
Yeah, like, do you have any advice for those looking to get into adventure racing?
Yeah, so advice for getting into adventure racing. I have to go with, my typical answer, I think, is find a race that's not too overwhelming or too grand of a scale, like Eco Challenge, for say, to be your first race. Now, there probably were some people that raced in Fiji that was their first ever adventure race, which probably was a bad idea, and they probably shouldn't have been there, and they probably didn't finish. And for most people, it's just a matter, their goal is just to finish a race like that. And the competitive racers, it's obviously a different, and more experienced racers, it's obviously a different goal that they're going to go into the race with. But I think pick a good starter race, and there's plenty of them out there. Many of them are coming back again, even with COVID. You're starting to see a lot of races popping up this fall. And also, be, what's the word, I guess, be selective with who your team members are going to be, as we talked about earlier. Pick like-minded competitors or friends and so forth that you're going to be able to go out and achieve the same type of goal you have set, whether it's just to finish or race and have fun as friends, or learn the ropes while doing the race and having fun, but not putting yourself in a situation where you jump on a team and you have no idea what the personality is of one or two of your other team members is like, and just end up as a nightmare.
Yeah.
And we've seen it on television because they love to dramatize that.
Yeah, right. Like a purposeful putting somebody who's never done it before on the.
Yeah, or they just, they do their casting. Now, the Eco Challenge basically screens the applications, and so it's a casting process, and they see the interest in storyline behind teams. And like, for say, there was a family of father and two daughters, and I've only seen the first 3 episodes of Eco Challenge. I'm a bad viewer right now. I still have to watch the other 7. But I heard there was some drama there, and I remember watching some of the early Eco Challenges, and you have people that are just like, oh my Lord, this is a disaster, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, speaking of kids, it seems like your kids have taken up after you and involved in outdoor sports. Have you ever done a family adventure race together?
Um, we've done a lot of adventures together as a family, but not necessarily races. Now, I will say my wife and my two kids, when they were young, I think they were actually, I think, yeah, here's a little poster of them on the wall here. Let me grab it real quick. It's a little picture of it, but
Cool.
I I was organizing the race at Beaver Creek at the time. I was right around the Balance Bar Series time, and so I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah, cool.
So my wife and two kids, they were a little bit smaller at that time. Um, they won the whole race for teams on that one. Um,
Nice.
they were strong, and when I say teams, I don't remember if we had male only teams. I think we had co-ed the whole thing, and so they ended up winning. What was it? First place, family division. Okay, so it was. I guess it was families. Anyway, it was fun. Um, but as for racing together, I thought years ago, like, oh, it would be pretty cool to, if Eco Challenge was to come back. I'm going to lower the shade a little bit again. If Eco Challenge was to come back um, sometime down the road, if I could potentially race with my two kids and my wife, maybe even as a team of four. Uh, but as they all kind of go down different paths, that's not too likely to happen at this point. Yeah, one never knows. Like my saying is best never to say never because you're going to eat your words.
Right. Well, you've seen this sport and multiple sports within this adventure racing category change so much over the years. Like, what are some of those things that have changed since you started getting into it?
Um, well, there was a really kind of a adventure racing had a kind of a big spike, and I guess it would have been early 2000s. We had Eco Challenge, Primal Quest, Ray Gawa, a lot of different races happening all over the globe. And we were, as Team Nike at the time, we were, picking and choosing. We were doing like 2 to 4 expedition races a year, like the World Championships, Eagle Challenge, maybe Primal Quest, other events like that. And then we would, Southern Traverse was the one out of New Zealand, was the early pioneer race that I was trying to think of earlier. So we would try to pick a number of races that would appease our ability to race, travel, fulfill sponsorship responsibilities, and recover. And so I'm trying to remember exactly where your question started, but anyway, there was the heyday was back in the early 2000s. Then it kind of tapered off, and a lot of what I might say, like regional series events, throughout the states and obviously around the globe, were still going on. But the television kind of dwindled, sponsorship money had dwindled. Uh, so there was the birth of the Adventure Racing World Series, and then in conjunction with that, the Adventure Racing World Championships, which continued on from those mid to what was it, like maybe 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there. Since then, there's been this international kind of scene going on. So it stayed alive, and now with Eco Challenge back, I think you're just going to see it really start to have a big boom again. I don't know, well, obviously what we did before for a heyday that we had, but sure seems to be a lot of passion out there for people interested in racing. And I heard, I don't know if it's true, but I heard last year when they had the applications come in from around the world for Eco Challenge, they had over 2,000 entries, applications. They took 66 teams. I think 63 or 4 towed the starting line. So there was a little bit of fallout or attrition. And this year, after the airing and their announcement, my guess is it probably nearly doubled with applications. I can't tell you, endless, or at least a great number of people asking me about, hey, what do I do? How do I apply? What should I do to potentially get in? What are they looking for? It's just all these questions and all these people different from around the U.S. and several out of the country and so forth. And it's makes me think that that interest is going to be really big, and it's going to be hard for teams to get in that don't have a really good story or maybe, you know, a competitive background in that field.
Yeah, I imagine also the gear that you had completely changed, right? So like think about the stuff that you had and you used when you started, and then think about the
Yeah.
stuff that you did in Fiji,
Oh yeah.
worlds
So
apart, right?
funny as it sounds, bikes obviously changed. Like I remember, I was thinking about when we were getting our gear together for the race, and like I had the old triple chain ring and 26-inch wheels, and you know, you did have suspension back then, but it, you know, that evolved as well as, you know, tubeless tires and all that sort of stuff. But then, you know, paddling, I don't know that the kayak paddles per se have changed much. Rafting, um, map and compass is still pretty much the same. We weren't allowed to use GPS and all these new fancy apps. Um, Footwear, not a huge change, but um, I was pulling out, like they said, okay, your PFD or your life jacket for the paddling sections has to be in good state. You know, can't have a lot of tears and this and that in it, and it's got to be approved by the organization. So I was pulling out some of our old PFDs because they're really cool. You know, they got the little pockets for the food and the bottles and all that sort of stuff, and the bladder in the back. And I was supplying our team with that. I had to do a few modifications because some of the elastic had, you know, gone tired and things like that. But yeah, you know, I went to what I call my gear room. So I have this storage room under our kitchen, and it's just loaded with gear, you know, adventure racing gear, from footwear to packs to kayaks to kayak gear to you name it. It's all in there, and it's, you know, I rummaged through it all and didn't have to spend a lot of money on new stuff other than shoes and headlights is another thing that's evolved so much. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just so state of the art compared to what we had back in the day.
Yeah, and speaking of advancements in gear, just so everybody knows, I originally found Mike's company called Out There USA while looking for lightweight backpacks, but something that could be used for multiple disciplines. And I've spent the past 3 weeks, I just bought one. I spent the past 3 weeks with this pack every day. I've been mountain biking, trekking, kayaking, fly fishing, and even photography. And I'm really impressed with how accessible all my gear is and how adaptable it is to different activities. Mike, what inspired you to create your own backpack?
Exactly what you're talking about. All these different activities and having accessibility to your gear, um, and functional packs as well. So um, as it goes back in the day, I've always been a bit of a tinkerer, if you want to call it that, where I tinker with pretty much anything I get, whether it was mountain bikes, snowshoes, ski gear now, you know, if I'm AT skiing and so forth, alpine touring, and whatever it is, you know, the boots, you always feel like, okay, there's a better mousetrap out there and it can be built, right? And so started with North Face. We didn't really do a whole lot with North Face when we first started racing, but we had those guys as a sponsor for a year and gave them some feedback, and I'm not sure they really went beyond that with it. Then it went to Salomon for a number of years, and that was definitely an area where they resorted to or utilized the athletes to help evolve their gear, which was great. Then it was on to Go Light and then Nike. And all those sponsors, you know, it always felt like, okay, we can improve their product. And they would have us sit down in meetings with them and talk about the gear and what we'd like to see and not. And then they'd usually make up some samples and we'd race with this stuff. And so, with all that said, I was always like stitching together. My wife I'd say, here, cut this pocket off of the bottle holder off of some pack, a pocket off another, and stitch it together. And we'd go and make something more of what I was, you know, my idea of what the proper pack should be like. And so in the end, as it turned out, Nike wasn't making a pack big enough for our expedition races. So like a 30-liter pack we have. Um, so a buddy of mine said, hey, let's look at starting up a company and building your own pack. So that's kind of where it started, and I just evolved from there. And you know, I had the 30-liter pack that we raced with for a couple of years with Nike, and that evolved, and then I broadened my line with 3 or 4 other packs, and so that's kind of how it all got started, was just all this, build that better mousetrap. And I'm, I don't know, I just, backpacks are one of those things that's so essential, because no matter what you do outside of, for say, maybe kayaking, you're going to have a pack on your back when you're in these adventure races. And so they better work and function and fit well if you're going to be out there for days on end with them.
Yeah. And from the Eco Challenge, it looked like so many people were using your pack, right? I
Yeah,
mean, words got around with the community.
I was fortunate. Now there was a competitor out there that had a different material. Um, and I think it was Hyperlight. There might have been one other.
Hmm.
They use a
Yeah.
sailcloth type material. And so I've been criticized for not having that in my line, which is something that, there's, here you go, breaking news. Now, anyway, we're looking at that for the next
Cool.
race, something on that lines for a race pack. But, the racing market's only so big, and I have minimums I have to order, and they're very spendy. But I think that there's a place there for me to branch out, or might say uh, expand into that market a little bit, or that material. So um, anyway, I think back to your statement or question there, I think we had over 50% of the racing teams utilizing my packs at Eco Challenge. So if you look at all the other brands out there being used, that's pretty good numbers for me. And uh, like I say, the other pack was the ones with the Dyneema material, because people don't want the fabric absorbing moisture, or having it be more waterproof was a benefit. Now, in the end, the waterproof thing, I talked to teams that were using, they just like poo-pooed that, because, even with the roll top and all that, you still have the ports that your hydration tube goes through, right? So
Right.
when that thing fills up and there's no drain holes out the bottom, then you're in trouble. Like mine, we'd stand above the water and it looked like your pack had a full bladder as it was spewing it out, but so there's little pros and cons, but in the end, I would much sooner have had a pack like ours that fit like they do in the features that we have, over worrying about half a pound of water that you're carrying around for an hour or so extra. When you think about, if you take a water bottle about the size of this, one of the 22-ounce bottles, that must be a couple pounds worth of water, right? So it isn't that much, and you can definitely manage or mitigate those things by being more gear cautious, or cautious isn't the word, but selective in what you carry and use, and the food you might eat, and all the levels of hydration of what you're carrying around, whether it's the pack with a little moisture in it, or the water that you're carrying in a bottle versus a heavy 2 or 3 liter bladder in your back, which is for me, I sell bladders, but I'm not a huge fan of them. I prefer to carry water bottles because they're quicker access, quicker to refill, and they it isn't just this big heavy thing that's you're carrying around on your back.
Well, it's kind of the same concept of buying like a carbon bike with carbon wheels and all of that stuff when you should just be losing 10 pounds, right? So,
Right, a little less ice cream every night, 2 or 3 nights a week, right?
yeah, exactly. Well, I really like the pack because it's 30 internal, but all of the pockets on the straps, you got the beaver straps and everything that's really accessible around the hip makes it super easy. Like even fly fishing, you want to have everything accessible. Photography, you want to have your camera ready and all of that stuff. And props to you, man. You've done a really good job. Where can people buy your backpack?
So mostly online sales these days. And the simplest way is to go to outthereusa.com. So out there, 2T's, USA.com. And you'll find our website. You can buy straight off there. We just had a great month. We ran for a month a sale in conjunction with the Eco Challenge airing on Amazon Prime. And so we closed that out, but numbers are still looking really good with sales, even without the discount on all of the packs that we had. Now we still have some discounts on the site, but you know, I'm just one of these big fans of good gear, and I believe in. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I believe I've created one of the best packs out there, no pun intended, and not just for adventure races. As you mentioned earlier, they're very versatile. And another key feature that comes to mind as we're talking here about it is a lot of companies or several companies will build different size packs for different size frames or individuals, whether they're a little broader or taller or shorter, thinner. My packs are, the body of the pack is a 15 liter or 30 liter or 45 liter. And what happens with the fit of it all is in the construction and design of the straps, whether it's the hip belts or the shoulder straps or lumbar panel, this sort of stuff. So my packs will fit, people generally from like 5 feet tall to maybe 6'6", 6'8", even in, from 100 pounds to 250 pounds. Different packs are going to fit people in different ways, obviously looking at the size of it, but it depends what the volume you're looking for, and then the fit is there.
Yeah, I'm 6'2", and I was easily able
You
to
are.
make certain adjustments with the straps, and it worked out fine. So
Yeah.
awesome. We're going to link all your website and stuff below. How can people stay connected with you and follow you on your adventures?
Well, I'm not a big social media guy that's always posting and always on it. So I tell people when they message me on social media, and I actually finally get to their message, to, hey, email me. So it's Mike at Out There USA is Mike at OutThereUSA.com is my email. I get those and I read those more regularly, obviously, than I do my social media posts. But I'm on Twitter at, it's, I think, at Mike Kloser. Same for, and that's Kloser. Same for Instagram. And then Facebook, just search under Mike Kloser. I think it's Mike.Kloser at Facebook.com or something, however that's URL is. But yeah, I'm there. I post reasonably often, but just, I know people are out there. I'm always interested in what people are up to. And when I have time, I like to check out what people are doing. And I know people are the same on the other end with me. So I'll try to be there enough for people to at least keep up to my exploits and so forth.
That's great. Well, honestly, Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really great to talk with you.
Likewise, and thank you. And hopefully we'll see you out on the trail or at one of these races soon.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know that it's really cool that everybody's getting outdoors. I hope that people maintain and kind of, and there's something about outdoors. It roots you, and it brings respect. Like for me, nature is logical. It makes sense. And I think that humanity kind of is super complex, mm-hmm. right? And we make things confusing, but the more you're in nature, the more there's like a very specific logic to things, and you become rooted. And I hope that our culture has changed because more people are on bicycles and more people are outside,